Hello and welcome. My name is Phil Melton. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at MercuryGate International. And I have the pleasure to welcome Kevin Zweier from the Transportation Practice at Chainalytics, who's joining me today as we discuss the Flatbed Market Outlook for 2021. Kevin, please tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Thanks, Phil. Great to be here. As you said, I run our transportation practice here at Chainalytics. I've been with the firm about 12 years at this point. My background, I've done a lot of different things on the consulting and service provider side, primarily around procurement and transportation management systems over my 25-year career. But happy to be here.
We're glad to have you. So let's start off by talking about the Flatbed Market Outlook for 2021. So, how can you utilize the Freight Market and Intelligence Consortium from DAT to really help drive or help highlight, I guess, some of the pricing trends in truck transportation with the emphasis on flatbed?
Well, one of the things is transportation markets are so much bigger than one shipper or carrier. So you have to know and understand what is happening in the marketplace in order, for you to map out a sensible strategy for your business. There's always a lot of questions is what we're seeing, is it me or is it the market? And the only way you can really know that is to have some way to benchmark and gather market intelligence, and consortiums like the one from DAT that you mentioned are a good tool for doing that. These are services that are typically based on real shipment data, not just generic bid data that comes in, not just spot rates off of load boards, but looking at real movements that occurred on real carriers, on real shipments for real shippers, across both the continuum of contract and spot movements, so that you can understand, okay, well, where are things going? Are we seeing volume increases? Are we seeing pricing increases? Are we seeing decreases? What's the state of capacity? How deep are people going into the routing guide? Those types of things. And that's important in every mode, but I think even more so with flatbed.
That's interesting. So let's discuss a little bit about this environment we're living in today, right? I mean, with everything that's been going on, with the pandemic, the economy, the ups and downs, we had a wild 2020 for sure. So let's talk about some of those things that might be influencing the current pricing trends within the market, and how some of these things that have happened have really impacted the flatbed market.
Yeah, I mean, there's been massive volume fluctuations over the last year in pretty much all modes, and it's been very uneven across those modes and different types of truckload transportation. I mean, you think about the early days of the pandemic when volumes spiked as we were trying to get toilet paper and other consumer products like that in stockpile, and then the economy went down considerably and everything got shut down, and so volumes went down with it. And then, of course, they spike up, and now everything is going gangbusters, and we're trying to rebuild inventory and all those different types of things. But even speaking, within flatbed itself, it saw quite a lot of different fluctuations during that time as well. I mean, you look at oil and gas movements; they went down considerably because a lot of us were sitting at home. We weren't using as much oil and gas products, and so that market took a hit, while companies that were in home improvement shot through the proverbial roof, pun intended, because we're all sitting here looking at, our houses, are getting tired of looking at everything in our houses and wanting to do some different pieces and different improvement projects. So even within industries or within particular modes of transportation, seeing massive fluctuations from a volume standpoint, and all of that overlaying the fact that there's, the human element, which is the driver and the capacity side of things, where they also are impacted by what's going on in the pandemic. And so our supply of drivers has fluctuated a lot. So all of those things have really impacted all of transportation markets. But I think the flatbed market has been even maybe more dramatic than some of the others.
Yeah, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the marketplace in general. I mean, one of the things that I do, in product marketing as well as when I was an industry principal is I'm taking a look at the market itself. And one of the things I was reading just the other day, we have tenders are way up, but tender rejects are way up. Like
Mhm.
almost 27%. I think it was 26.6. Are you seeing the same thing in the flatbed market with rejects? I know at one point some people wouldn't even take things into the city of New York, those types of things. But does that feed into the flatbed market as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're right now we're it's um, quite quite high spot market rates across pretty much dry van, reefer, and flatbed as well. I think the February spot rate for flatbed was the highest going back to August 2018. The load to truck ratio is has been incredibly high with some of DAT's data there as well, and so that's a measure of how many loads are out there searching for a truck. So it's definitely been a challenge on the flatbed side over the last couple of weeks and months to find that capacity to manage those routing guides.
Well, speaking of routing guides, what has the market volatility, if you will, really done to managing of your routing guides if you're a
Uh,
shipper, right?
Yeah, put it bluntly, it's made it really hard. It's exhausted or destroyed many a routing guide, and left a lot of shippers at the mercy of dialing for diesels or playing the spot market or using non-asset based providers maybe a little more than they've been comfortable doing in the past. So routing guides and managing routing guides in the recent past has been a challenge for many shippers. That's for sure.
One of the things that I've always kind of done in my career is always had a backup plan, right? No matter what I do, the inevitable will happen. Something will
Yep.
happen. So, do you think it's necessary to have a plan beyond your primary contract carriers? And if so, how do you propose shippers really engage with the broader group of carriers out there?
Well, the short answer is 100% yes, but I'm guessing you probably knew that. But yeah, I mean, I think shippers need to be very careful about consolidating to too small a core group of carriers. Um, we see whenever the markets are down, and we were coming off a fairly soft market in 2019, even into the beginning of 2020, and we saw a lot of shippers really consolidating their carrier bases, going to just a small number of non-asset based players and asset based players. And that's great when the market is soft, but when you get into volatile times like this, that core, no matter how great they are and how wonderful the service is, eventually they tap out, right? They hit their limit on what they can do for you, and you need other relationships to get the capacity that you need. And so we're always recommending that shippers, be careful that they don't get too consolidated a base of carriers, even though it's easier to manage that way. The other piece is you can't just turn on a new carrier very easily, right? Some shippers will say, okay, well, we'll invite a bunch of new carriers to a sourcing event that we're going to do, and we'll supplement our capacity that way. But the issue is it's real hard to award business to a carrier you've never done business with before. So carrier discovery really needs to be a full-time or a year-round endeavor. And I'd say the last point that I would make about that broader group of carriers is just ensuring that it's a diverse group of carriers, or I should say more specifically, a diverse group of providers of different carrier types. So, looking at, what should be going through common carriers. Is there a place for a dedicated fleet in my business somewhere? Not having all my eggs in the asset or broker, buckets. Having a mix of national providers, regional providers, local providers, big and small, right? I mean, it's it's kind of the same thing when you think about your financial portfolio and you want to have diversification across stocks and fixed incomes and bonds and all those different types of different types of things. It's no different when we're talking about transportation.
Yeah, I can see where there'd be a lot of, if I was a carrier today and, I'm gonna award so much capacity to my shippers, and at some point that capacity, if I can get more money for additional capacity somewhere else, I'm gonna start adding capacity to where I'm getting a bigger return on my work, right? More money,
Yep.
more revenue.
Yep.
And you see a lot of people doing that today. So, when you think about shippers, what should a shipper do when they find themselves in that situation where they are really competing against each other, if you will, for the same capacity in the marketplace?
Yeah, and it's trite and easy to say, and this cliche always gets trotted out when markets get tight. But trying to make yourself that shipper of choice, making yourself as easy to work with as possible, listening to what the carriers are complaining about when they're coming to pick up your loads and actually trying to fix it, right? The proverbial adage of time is money is the biggest thing for a lot of these carriers. If they're hung up at your locations or your consignees for a long period of time and they can't turn their equipment, that's a problem. So that's probably the first thing that any shipper needs to focus on. Now, of course, pricing can be the other the other side of that coin. If you're struggling to get capacity, you may have to look at increasing what you're paying to those providers to incentivize them to take your freight. Certainly not the first step that anyone wants to do, but we'd be lying if we said that doesn't play a role. And I think that's one of the areas when you start getting into different pricing structures, whether it's pop-up fleet, surge pricing, tier pricing, et cetera. Transportation management systems are one of the tools that can help keep track of and manage those different pricing structures and analyze the situations where it makes sense to make use of those.
Yeah, I would say, here at MercuryGate, our TMS has that ability, right? I mean, over the last year, we've done a lot to really support various strategies around contract carriers, whether it's a digital freight marketing, when to go to spot, how to go to spot, incorporating those DFMs or digital freight brokers into that process as well, right? Really, it opens up that market and by tendering loads and looking for a price on the fly. And you see more and more people coming out now with guaranteed capacity. Those are the types of things I think a TMS can really help manage for you. And I would say, being in the industry for almost 40 years myself and looking over about 35 of those years really on the technology side and supply chain technology, I would say this has been the biggest drive for supply chain tech this year. And one of the things is a TMS. People are constantly looking for, out there looking in the market, trying to figure out, hey, how do I manage my logistics and supply chain better than what I'm doing today? How do I drive cost out? How do I, manage my carriers, my trucks, if they have a fleet, those types of things. And, really we at MercuryGate support all that. So I get to see a lot of interesting things that are going on in the marketplace. So as we wrap up thinking about 2021, any final comments from you?
Well, you hit on the one there. I think we've seen that acceleration of those integrations to other capacity options, right? You touched on the digital freight brokers or digital freight, whatever you want to call it. But I think more of those integrations across TMS systems to these different sources of capacity and different tools to enable visibility across the network. I think that was already happening, but we've seen the pandemic accelerate that.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more of that here in 21 as well. So I want to thank you, Kevin, and I want to thank our listeners for joining us today. So please look forward to our next conversation where Kevin and I will really do a deeper dive into carrier management.